this St. John's Stewardship Co-Chair for 2026. Most of you should have received in the mail a letter from us this week. I think the chairman and I received mine on Friday. If you didn't receive one, it's our fault. The letter contained the pledge card, but I brought some extras. So just see me after church and I'll make sure you have one. When I was young, in the early stages of my career, I was inspired by the writings of Stephen Covey. In particular, a book he wrote called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I see some of you nodding, so you're among the 40 million people around the world who have read this book. It was quite inspiring for me as a young lawyer. In this book, Covey promotes what he calls the character ethic, which he describes as aligning one's values with universal common principles. The 7 habits are really good common sense guidelines that people have tried to incorporate into their personal and professional lives. I'm among those. This first habit is be proactive. Being proactive, he means taking responsibility for your life and choices, rather than being controlled by external circumstances or your feelings. The second habit, begin with your in that habit, among others, he encourages us to prepare personal and professional mission statements, which I'm sure many of us have done many times. Today, however, I'd like to focus for a moment on this third habit. Put first things first. This habit is all about helping us to balance priorities. Covey tells us that urgency often pulls us in many directions, yet true meaning is found when we focus on what is most important. For example, our baptismal covenant calls us to seek and serve Christ in all persons and to strive for justice and peace. Living out these vows is rarely urgent, but it is certainly very important. It requires intentionality. Managing our time and resources with intentionality can be put into focus with a simple analogy that Covey uses in his book. Imagine a large jar, and imagine a measure of sand and a measure of large rocks. Your task is to get the sand and the rocks in the jar. The jar represents our priorities in utilizing our resources. The rocks represent the highest priorities in our lives, such as health, family, food, shelter, and others. The sand, however, represents the many distractions that compete for our time and compete for our resources, compete with those important priorities and often consume those resources. Examples of that, of course, are your daily Starbucks addiction, or mindlessly scrolling through TikTok or Facebook, essentially wasting time. So if you put the sand in the jar first, as we would do if we were focusing on the unimportant, urgent things, it's very easy to see that you can fill the jar up before you have room for the rocks. However, if instead you put the big rocks in first, you can imagine that you can then pour the sand in, filling the crevices around the rocks, and put everything into the jar. I thought about demonstrating that today, but I was sure I would still sand on the floor and we would all slip going to the meeting. Jesus commands us to put first things first. In Matthew, when he says, "Seek ye first would suggest that one manifestation of this command is to give priority to school. If we're proactive, begin with the end in mind, and put first things first, we may be inspired. But stewardship is one of those big rocks. Begin first. Put that commitment into the jar ahead of the other distractions that consume our resources. Now, you have many opportunities to return your pledge card. For us, you can either send it back in the envelope that was provided to you. You can drop it in the collection places or in the office. You can go online and submit it that way. You can send it in email. There's just many, many ways to do it. I encourage everyone to do that. And as we prayerfully consider filling out our pledge cards to support the